Sham Sharadava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Samsaradava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurnanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurnanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasenam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shri Vigrara Tana Nityanana Shringaratanama Diramarjanado Shiviga Yuktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Satana Truptam Hari Bhakta Sangam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Satana Truptam Kridvaiva Trupti Vajato Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shiradikamo Davayoraparam Madhurya Leela Guna Rupanam Shirarika Madhurya Leela Guna Rupanam Pratikshana Swa Tanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Nikunja Yuno Ratikeli Siddhai जयाली फिर जुक्तिल अपेक्षणीय निकुंजायुनो जाति के ऋषि जयाली तत्रातिदाक्ष अतिबलवस्य वन्दे गुरुश्री चरुणरो वृन्दम् सच्चाधरिद्वेन समस्तश्रेष्ठीन् रुक्तास्तथव गत एव साधुभिः सच्चाधरिद्वेन किन्तु प्रभोज प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरो वृन्दम् किन्तु प्रभो प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरुश्री यस्य प्रसाद भगवत्प्रसादम् यस्य प्रसादम् नगति कुतपि यस्य प्रसादम् भगवत्प्रसादम् यस्य प्रसादम् नगति कुतपि न्यायं शुभं तस्य यस्त्रिसंज्ञं वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरो वृन्दम् न्यायं शुभं तस्य यस्त्रिसंज्ञं वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरो वृन्दम् वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरो वृन्दम् वन्दे गुरुश्री नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते वेदांत नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पततादिश तारिणे सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष पततादिश जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Krishna Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Nitaya Namah Krishna Jadavaya Namah Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudam Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jai Vishwapara Paramahansa Prabhajaka Acharya, Astotara Sarasi Shimari's Divine Grace, Abhacharvina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Iskon Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapakachar Vaishnav Siromani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhar ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Agunasat Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ji ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrind ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय. जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्रीमन गौरांग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावरण अवतार की जय. गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जग की जय. जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय. बृहद निदांग ट्रांसडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जाए. शिष्य राधा कृष्ण गोप कृष्ण राधा कुंद श्याम कुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जाए. श्री ब्रज भूमि वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जाए. तेलोशिव शिष्य राधा नील माधव की जाए. श्री श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जाए. परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जाए. श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जाए. श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु स्मृति देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जाए. भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशना कर्ण सिंहदेव भगवान की जाए. सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जाए. जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जाए. तुलसी महारानी वृंदी देवी भक्ति देवी की जाए. श्री मथुरा रानी की जाए. समवेत भक्त वृंद की जाए. निताय गौर प्रमानंदे. All glories to the Son of the bodies. All glories to the Son of the bodies. All glories to the Son of the bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru. Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya
Namaste Narayana.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Praladaladaini. Praladaladaini. Hiranyakashipurvaksha.
Hiranyakashipurvaksha.
Shilatankanakalaye.
Silatankanakalaye.
Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha.
Ito Nisingha Parato Nisingha.
Yato yato yami tato Narsimha.
Jayo jato jato yami tato Nisingha.
Bahir Narsimho Hridaye Narsimho.
Bahir Nisingha Hridaye Nisingha.
Narasimhamadim Sharanam Prapate.
Narasingamadim Sharanam Prapade.
Hitavakara Kamalavare Nakham Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavadrita Narahare Rupa. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare.
Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Kesavadrita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare.
Jayo Keshavadrita Narahare Rupa. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare.
Jayo Kesavadrita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare.
Jayo Narasimhadev. Jayo Narasimhadev. Jayo Narasimhadev. Jayo Narasimhadev.
Jayo Nisinghadev. Jayo Nisinghadev. Nisinghadev. Jayo Nisinghadev.
Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Jayo Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj. Jaya Prahlad Maharaj.
Jayo Jayo Prabhupada. 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 Jayo Jayo Prabhupada.
Jai Jai Prabhupada. 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 Jai Jaya Prabhupada.
Jayo Jayo Gurudev, Gurudev, Jai Gurudev, Jayo Jayo Gurudev.
Jai Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jai Jaya Gurudev.
Nithai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nithai Gora Hari Bol.
Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol.
बोलो भक्त विघ्न विनाशक नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय।
Jai,
भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय।
Jai,
शीला प्रभुपाद की जय।
Jai,
पिताई गौर प्रेमानंदे।
Hari Bol. Shri Vrindai Tulasidevi Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasidevi Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi ki jai.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Priyasi Namo Namaha Radha Krishna Seva Bhavo Abhilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Bhavo Abhilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi.
Ye Tumhara Sharana Lord Tara Vancha Purna Ho
Tamara Sharanana Taravanta Puna.
Kripa Kori Koro Thare Vrindavana Vasi
Pakare Karakare Vrindavanavasi.
Morae Abhilas Vilas Kunje Diyova
Morae kunde diyoba
Nayane heribo sada jugala ruparasi
Aminayane divosada jugala ruparasi
Any vedhana dharo sakiranu gatha khoro
Nivedana dara sakirayano gatakara
Seva adi khara diye koro nijadasi
Seva yade karani karani jadasi
Dina Krishna dasi khoi ejna mora hoy
Ina Krishna daseko Eyena mora
Shri Radha Govinda preme sarayena bhasi
Shirada Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi
Shri Radha Govinda preme sarayena bhasi
Shirada Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi
Yani khani cha papane Brahma hatyari khani cha Tani tani prana shante Pradakshinam pare pare
Yani kani sapapani Brahmatade kanisha Anitane pranasanti Pradakshina pare pare
Yani khani cha papani Brahma hatyari khani cha Tani tani pranakshante pradikshanam pare pare
Yani kani sapapani Brahmatade kanisha Anitane pranasanti Pradakshina pare pare
Yani khani cha papani Brahma hatyari khani cha Tani tani pranakshante pradikshanam pare pare
Yani kani sapapani Brahmatade kanisha Anitane pranasanti Pradakshina pare pare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Satavatai Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Satavatai Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Satavatai Namah. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki. Oh Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision I would always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Citizens of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always fame and love Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Tava vidadatulam poto matpranatastu saivana para. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Ki Jai. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it is praised the rays of the benediction moon. It's the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. Oh my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have 100 million names like Krishna and Govinda. In this transcendental name, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There's not even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. Oh my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and strolling in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer our respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I'm fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when with my eyes were decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name, when with my voice choked up, even the hairs on my body stand on the end at the recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord. He should remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he's always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri 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 Kastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our respectful obeisances unto all Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord, who are just like desired trees. They can fulfill the desire of everyone and they're full of compassion.
The other way, the other way.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadyasya yatam vayadi tarataschatirasvavigyasvarat. Tenne brahma hridaya adhikavaye mojanti jasuraya. Tejo varimrida jata vinimayo jatra trisargom rusya. Tamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyang param dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth,
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth
and the primeval cause of all causes,
and the primeval cause of all
of the
causes,
creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested
He is
universes.
directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
And
manifestations.
he's independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond
It
him.
is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of
the
Brahmaji,
original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him even the great sages and demigods are placed into
As one is
illusion.
bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory
of water seen on
representations
fire or land seen on water.
of the water in the fire, or land in the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe,
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of
appear
nature,
factual although they are unreal.
appear fractal, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri
who
Krishna,
is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternal existence in the transcendental abode,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material
I
world.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravotra,
Dharma prajita
paramo
kaitavotra,
nirmatsaranam sitam,
paramo nirmasaranam
vedyam
satam,
vastavamatra vastu,
vedyam vastavamashtra vastu,
shivadam tapa trayonulanam,
shivadam taputrayomlanam,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni
Kim
Kriti,
va aparir Ishvaraha,
Kimva paririshvaraha,
Sadyohridi Avarudhyate Tra,
Sadyurudya varudya titra,
Kriti Bihi Sususubhistakshanat,
Kritibhi shushushubhistakyanat,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
And this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Puran propounds the highest
which
truth,
is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in the
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The high truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproot the threefold
This
miseries.
beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other
As soon
scripture?
as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of
by
Bhagavatam,
this culture of knowledge,
by this cult of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpatoror galitam phalam,
sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam,
Sukamukhadam Vridadrava Sangitam,
pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam,
muhur ahoraska bhuvibhavakaha.
Mura Hora Sika Bhuvi Bhavuka.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Shema
the
Bhagavatam.
mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit, the desired truth, the Vedic
It
literature.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful,
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shrivatam Punyam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantakstohi Bhadrani.
Vidyantasto Hiya Bhadrani.
Vidunati Suhitsatam.
Vidunati Surit Satam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic literatures,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing friend,
and purifies a devotee who continually engages in hearing of him.
and purifies devotee constantly engaged in hearing him.
Nastapresu Bhadresu
Nasta Presha Bhadrishu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about the Bhagavatam, as he hears more from the Bhagavatam and from the
As he
devotees,
hears more from Bhagavatam,
as he hears more about, as he hears more from the Bhagavatam
he hears more from Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees.
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
Becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tada Rajastamo Bhava
kamaloba dayaschaye
Kamaloya
cheta
Dayascha
etar inavidam
Etaitarna Arvidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Sitam Satve proceeded.
By development of devotional service,
By developing a devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of
and
ignorance.
thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And as material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prastana manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata
bhagavat tattva vigyanam
Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mutas Sangashyate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these spirits are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure
the
goodness,
candidate remains steady in a position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
become enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understand the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis
Vidyate Hridaya Granti
shidyante sarvasamsaya
Siddhyante Sarvasamsaya
shiyante chasya karmani
Jyante Chasya Karmani
drishta evat manishware.
Drusta Evad Manishvari.
Thus, bhakti yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
That's the Bhakti Yoga serves the hard note of material
and
affection
enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables one to come at one to the stage of Samsham Samagrama,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute true personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, verse number 30. Dwar akshini chakshur abut patanga
Dyorakshini Charchura Bhut Patanga
pakshmani vishnur ahani ubecha
Pakshmani Vinod Ahani Ubecha
tadbru vijrimba parameshti dishnam
Tadbru Vidrimba Paramesti Drishna
aposyatalu rasa eva jiva.
Apo Shalalu Rasa Eva Jiva.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The sphere of outer space constitutes his eye pits, and the eyeball is the sun as the power of seeing. His eyelids are both the day and night, and in the movements of his eyebrows, the Brahma and similar supreme personalities reside. His palate is the director of water, Varuna, and the juice or essence of everything is his tongue. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. To common sense, the description in this verse appears to be somewhat contradictory, because sometimes the sun has been described as the eyeball, and sometimes as the outer space sphere. But there is no room for common sense in the injunctions of the Shastras. We must accept the description of the Shastras and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. Common sense is always imperfect, whereas the description in the Shastras is always perfect and complete. If there is any incongruity, it is due to our imperfection and not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching Vedic wisdom. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This is a very important point to be made and understood by devotees. Obviously, materialists will not understand this point. They'll argue against it. However, we should be confident that if something seems contradictory, it's because we don't have enough information about it. But there's nothing contradictory in the Vedas. And if we're just patient and just, as it says, it says that we must accept the descriptions of the Shastra and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. Obviously, the Virat Rupa is way beyond our ability to comprehend, because it encompasses past, present, and future, and everything in the material world, and including even things that are somewhat outside what we would consider the material world, because there's the manifest part of the material world and an unmanifest part of the material world. So obviously we will have difficulty accommodating rationally all the descriptions of this Virat Rupa. However, we should be confident that if we focus on the Virat Rupa as the form of the Lord in the material world, we will eventually, by the mercy of Krishna, have knowledge revealed to us so that we can accommodate all these apparent contradictions. But they're not actually contradictions. It's just that we're lacking some knowledge. So therefore, Prabhupada says, we must accept the description of the Shastras and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. Common sense is always imperfect, whereas the description in the Shastras is always perfect and complete. If there is any incongruity, it is due to our imperfection and not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching the Vedic wisdom. So, some people would say, oh, well, this is not rational, this is all dogmatic. You have to accept whatever is said, you can't question it. Because people are taught in schools today to question everything, even the existence of God. And therefore, when they develop such a challenging attitude, they exclude themselves from the possibility of understanding Vedic knowledge. Like for example, you can't challenge certain things like that are self-evident. Like for example, every child has a mother and father. You can say, "Oh, I don't accept that." And why? Well, because I was born in a test tube. Okay, but what was in the test tube? Empty air? No, there was an ovum and there was sperm in the test. Where did they come from? From the test tube? No, they were put in there, and they were gotten from a man and a woman. So everybody has a mother and father. They say, do they produce the ovum and do they produce the sperm in the laboratory? No, they get them, and then they put them in a test tube that creates, and then there's optimal temperature and things like that that is similar to what's in the womb of a mother, and then there is eventually a fetus that comes out of that. So people will challenge things all the time, especially because they want everything to be rational, and they think, because of false ego, that they can understand everything through their own observation and speculation. But there are many mysterious things that are beyond human comprehension. But when we are humble and we accept the authority of the acharyas and pure devotees, then this knowledge is revealed to us. It's a different system of knowledge. It's not academic. So, therefore, if there is any incongruity, it is due to our imperfection and not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching the Vedic wisdom. Now, that doesn't mean you can approach every book like that. If you read a book written by a speculator, that's different. But the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita are not written by speculators. Maybe some speculators comment on them, give their own purports. That should be rejected. But the bona fide verses and purports given by the acharyas cannot be rejected on the plea that, oh, it doesn't make sense to me. So we are not the final authority if something is bona fide or not bona fide. The final authority is Krishna and the acharyas. So that's the Vedic system. Now, someone will say, well, the Catholic Church says the same thing. You have to trust whatever the Pope says because he's God's representative on the earth. That can be questioned if the Pope is following the regulative principles. And he doesn't follow the regulative principles. He eats meat and all kinds of other things. So, therefore, we can't accept him as being an infallible source of knowledge. And in order for people to reject what Krishna says, they have to make stories about him that are not true. Like the Mayavadis, they say, oh, when he comes in the material world, he has a material body, just like we do. That's not true. Krishna's body is Satchitananda Vigraha. So this misinterpretation is purposely done to bring Krishna down to a mundane level where he can be subject to mundane principles, such as question everything. If in the famous line of reasoning of atheists is, well, you say everything has a cause. Therefore, Krishna must have a cause also. But that's not what we say. We don't say everything has a cause. We say Krishna is the cause of all causes. That's what we say. And therefore, everything emanates from him. So this will be contested by the atheists because in order to accommodate their atheistic point of view that God doesn't exist, they have to bring God down to the level of an ordinary human being. And therefore they do that through word jugglery, through sophistic jugglery. Sophism means a false interpretation of something. So we have to be careful to discriminate between speculators and bona fide authorities. Otherwise, we'll be easily misled. The speculators, they use logic and reasoning. At least they claim they do. And but actually, most of the time, it's false logic and false reasoning. Just like there was once a man, and he was studying the scripture, and he saw that Yamaraj was a perfect Brahmana. So he used his logic and reasoning. He said, Yamaraj is a perfect Brahmana, and Brahmanas never touch stool. So if I want to escape death, I should smear my stool on my body every day. Therefore, when Yamaraj comes to get me, he won't touch me because he's a perfect Brahmana. Well, that's using logic and reason, right? but it's false logic and reason. It's not real logic and reason, because Yamaraj doesn't have to touch you in order to take your soul out of your body. It's claimed that he uses ropes to lasso the soul and pull it out of the body. So anyway, this is a false type of reasoning. Yamaraj is a brahmana, so I'll just smear stool on my body and he'll never touch me when death comes. So we have to be able to recognize these false word juggleries and speculations. Otherwise, we become misled. So when people talk about, let's say, the Big Bang, they say it all started from a point of infinite density. Well, according to mathematics, a point has no dimension. Prabhupada talks about that. He says, that's not true. A point has dimension, but we're not able to measure it because we don't have instruments fine enough to measure the dimension of a point. So, therefore, the premise that a point does not have dimension is false. Now, does a point have infinite density? That's another issue, because they say the Big Bang starts from a point of that has infinite density. Well, have you ever seen a point that has infinite density? I don't think so. And therefore, again, this is false reasoning. This is making up things and using word jugglery in order to convince people that their so-called theory is rational, and that the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita is irrational to them. So therefore, unless a person actually engages in devotional service, they cannot become free of this false logic and word jugglery and tricks of how to convince people of something that's not true. This devotional service is essential. Now, some people think, oh, well, that's for less intelligent people, this deity worship and flower garlands and bowing down and standing up and bowing down and standing up. This is all for lower class people who are sentimental, and this chanting and dancing. But no, it's not. This is what Lord Chaitanya did. This is how he spread the Sankirtan movement. And this is how the movement is continuing to be spread, through chanting, dancing, feasting, and hearing Bhagavad Gita. So this hearing is essential. And this is emphasized in the first canto, second chapter, where it says, verse number 18. Let's see what it says here. Tat Sharadana Munayo, where's that verse? Anyway, the verse says that one can understand Srimad Bhagavatam only by the mercy of the devotee, and not by using logic and reasoning as the materialists do. So people want to bring everything down to the level of this logic and reasoning, and therefore many tricks are played on the mind by doing that. So when you hear that Krishna can lift Govardhan Hill when he's only 7 years old and hold it on his pinky, people say that's not possible. That's a fantasy, and therefore they reject it. And because they reject it like that, they remain atheistic. And unless we have the ability to clearly hear Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees, we become fooled. And we begin to believe things that are not true, and therefore we become misled. And what do we mean by misled? We can waste our entire life believing things that are not true, and therefore we don't get a chance to go back to Godhead. So what we're hearing now is the description of the Virat Rupa. This is impossible for a person to understand on their own. They have to hear the description in order to come to grips with what it's talking about. It is a material form of God that encompasses everything. And as we discussed before about the pantheism, pantheistic belief is that the whole universe is God, or that there are many, many gods, like the demigods. And therefore they want to amalgamate everything into one big chunk, let's say. Well, that chunk is there already. It's the Virat Rupa. And now we're hearing a description of it. But the description is beyond our imagination. And this is what happens when we hear transcendental knowledge. Our scope, our time and space module increases exponentially. When we live in these small modules, like a room, a kitchen, a dining room, a office space, a car. We spend most of the time in those type of spaces, right? And every once in a while we go out into nature, but most of the time it's spent in these small rooms. So, we measure time in terms of seconds and minutes and hours. We don't measure it in terms of yugas, right? That can last millions of years. So, therefore, a time-space module is very, very limited. And when we hear about these expansive pastimes of the Lord, or we hear about his Virat Rupa, it's almost impossible for people to understand that, due to the duality between the body and the soul, due to the time-space module and limited time-space module, and due to sense gratification that limits our scope of activity to a bedroom or a couch or whatever. So, we sit in the dark and watch a movie, or watch television, or play a game on the computer. So we're so limited. It's just like a person who goes to jail. They're limited. They're in a small cell most of the time. And maybe they only have 1 hour they can go outside into a field and do a little exercise and walk around, and then they go back into that little small cell. Well, we're in that cell. It's called the body. It's very limited. And to hear about Krishna expanding himself infinitely in the Chaturvyuha, and Narayana, and the Vishnu forms in the material world, and now the Virat Rupa, these things are gigantic. The form of Mahavishnu is gigantic. It's beyond our comprehension. And the form of Virat Rupa is gigantic. It's beyond our comprehension. So therefore, we must hear submissively and not, as Prabhupada says, we must accept the description of the Shastras and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. So, coming back to this, what really limits us the most is sense gratification. That is what's going to stop us from understanding spiritual knowledge. And the reason we came to the material world was for sense gratification. We became jealous of Krishna. Why should he be the center of attraction of the Rasa Lila? Why not me? So, therefore, when those type of thoughts come into the mind, and those type of thoughts come into our mind now also. Why can't I be the center of attraction? Why can't I be God and order people around and have them serve me? That's why when we were initiated, we received the name Das or Dasi, which means the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So, but most of the time, people don't want to be Das, they want to be Prabhu. See? So we refer to people as Prabhu, that they're the master and we are the servant, right? Even Prabhupada, he would sign his letter, your ever well wisher, right? And devotees, they usually sign a letter and they say, your humble servant, right? So this idea of being the servant and not the master, that is Krishna consciousness. Our constitutional position is to be a servant to the Lord. Well, yesterday we didn't quite finish this one point that I was making, and that is when, by hearing about the pure love of the residents of Vraja, devotees will worship me, meaning Krishna, on the path of spontaneous love, abandoning all rituals of religiosity and fruitive activity. And then in the purport, Prabhupada explains that Raghunath Das Goswami and King Kalushakar and Alvar in the Sri Vaishnava tradition both have written similar descriptions. And what is the description? Well, King Kalushakar says, I have no attraction for performing religious rituals or holding any earthly kingdom. I do not care for sense enjoyments. Let them appear and disappear in accordance with my previous deeds or karma. My only desire is to be fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, even though I may continue to take birth here, life after life. So we spoke yesterday how this basically is saying the same thing as Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitam, Jagadish. The same thing that Lord Chaitanya has said in the Shiksastakam, and also Raghunath Das Goswami has said the same thing. He says that one should develop spontaneous love of Godhead, even at the risk of transgressing all traditional codes of morality and religiosity. Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, has written in his prayers called the Mana Shiksha that one should simply worship Radha and Krishna with all attention. And one should not be much interested in performing Vedic rituals or simply following rules and regulations. And of course, Krishna says the same thing. We've gone over this, but it's always good to repeat things so that it stays in the mind. And he says that Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna Nirdvandva Nityasattvaso Niryoga Shema Atvaman. O Arjuna, the Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the 3 modes of material nature. Arjuna, become transcendental to these 3 modes, be free from all dualities and for all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Now, this is a huge statement. Become free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety. But wait a minute. Everybody is in anxiety in this world for gain and safety. Gain means making profit and, not going bankrupt. And safety means being safe from rogues and robbers and tax collectors and this thing and that thing. So if everyone is in anxiety about gain and safety, how can we become free from it? That means that we would be one exceptional person amongst 1 trillion plus people. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, all material activities involve actions and reactions in the 3 modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results, which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. In other words, there's a whole section of Vedas called Karma Kanda that encourages fruitive activities. Encourages. Why? Because this is why people came to this world and left Krishna. They wanted to be engaged in fruitive activities. It's just like sometimes in a business, let's say someone is a bank teller and they're earning, let's say they're earning $30,000 or $35,000 a year as a beginning salary, but they're dealing with sometimes $300,000, $400,000 during the day of incoming and outgoing money. So they're supposed to be honest and be satisfied with their $35,000 a year. But if they get greedy, then they find ways of pilfering from the till, from the money that they're receiving and giving out and receiving. And at the end of the day, they have to tally everything and make sure that what went out and what came in is zero. In other words, all the accounts are correctly made. But many times, bank officials or tellers, they get caught stealing from the till. And they do it in different ways, many clever ways they do it. So that means that they're not satisfied with the salary that they're getting and the health benefits and this thing and that thing, and therefore they want more than what they've been allowed or allotted. So in the same way, this mentality of fruitive activity means you perform an activity and you get a benefit from it, or you make money, or you get gifts, just like politicians. Politicians who are not satisfied with their $60,000 a year salary, right? They start making deals with people that come to them, especially if they're in the position of power. They can advocate certain people to get contracts from the government. So oftentimes they receive gifts. Of course, they're not allowed to receive gifts, but they receive gifts in very tricky ways from these developers. And then the developers get permits or they get contracts with the government where they make 100 times more than what they gave the politician. You see, this happens all the time, all the countries of the world, even the United States. People think, this only happens in India. It never happens in the United States. That's not true. It happens in a bigger level in the United States than in India. And the Indians have even learned from the Americans and the British how to cheat on a massive level, because if there's big cheating, really big cheating, people are afraid to admit it. Not the thieves, I mean the government people, because they can't imagine that someone would be so audacious to steal so much money. And so it's harder to deal with these big thieves than it is with the little thieves. Little thieves get caught and they throw the book at them. They end up in jail for years. The big thieves, somehow or other, just like there was a big thief called Michael Milken, he stole $4 billion from the stock market, right? Well, he had to go to jail for 4 years and had to pay a fine, maybe some hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he made money. He got away with it, actually. 4 years is not a long time, right? And a couple $100 million is not a long time if you stole $4 billion, you see. So they calculate that. People calculate that like that. They're willing to take the 4 years and $300-400 million because they're getting away with $4 billion. You see. So this is why we're in the material world. We decided to engage in fruitive activity. And there's never any limit to how much a person wants. As soon as they get away with something, little by little, then they keep increasing it until they finally get caught. So this verse is saying, all material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant, meaning material activities, for fruitive results, meaning profit, which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. So in other words, it's saying, the Vedas say, okay, here's a whole section where you can do these different pujas, and you can make money, you can have a nice body, you can have a nice wife or husband, you can have good kids, and you can even go up to the heavenly planets and enjoy much more increased sense gratification, but you just have to attain those things by following these rules. You know, you need a pundit, and he has to say these mantras, hopefully correctly, and you have to be a little bit submissive to listen to hoo-ah, hoo-ha, hoo-ha, all that stuff. And then you'll get your result. Well, and this is so that the beast is calmed down and feels some satisfaction, right? I did the puja and I got the result, right? And but at the same time they had to follow some rules, right? And then eventually, if they keep doing this, there's a chance that they can become purified, because they see the correlation between acting in the mode of goodness and having material benefits, more benefits than by stealing and killing and cheating and things like that. So, but that's the theory. The problem is, in Kali Yuga, the priests don't explain things correctly. And they're just as greedy as the person who's coming to them who's greedy. So, therefore, they don't really want people to stop doing the pujas. They want it to continue because they're making a living off of it. So they're not real brahmanas. They are businessmen. They're banyas. There's a brahmana and there's a banya. So then it says, Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy, where, in the beginning, there is Brahma Jigyasa, or questions on the supreme transcendence. Well, the whole Vedic literature is questions and answers. You go Padma Purana, Padmavati is asking questions to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is answering her. You go to Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is asking questions to Krishna, and Krishna is answering them. You go to Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj is asking questions, and Sukadeva Goswami is answering them. So the whole Vedic literature is questions and answers, right? So, but that's called Brahma Jigyasa, or questions on not how to make money on the stock market or this thing or that thing. The questions are about transcendence, the supreme transcendence, or about Krishna. So all the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and get rid of the material entanglement. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma Kanda chapter, are finished, then the chance for spiritual realization is offered in the form of the Upanishads, which are part of the different Vedas, as the Bhagavad Gita is part of the fifth Veda, namely Mahabharata. The Upanishads mark the beginning of transcendental life. So after all these pujas and after all the success that one gets, if they hopefully are now satisfied, then they can hear the Upanishads, Upanisha, coming closer to Isha. See, they got what they wanted. They got the heavenly planets and the sense gratification, all that. Now, if they're satisfied with that, now they can start asking questions about, what is actually the purpose of life? And how can I become free from the cycle of birth and death? Because even on the heavenly planets, although life is longer, still there's death. Still there's old age, there's disease. So then it says, as long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress, or cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. See, this gain and loss, just like someone may buy a stock, and for 1 year it keeps going up, and they're happy, and they see their stock valuation way up high. You know, they bought it at $10, and now it's $1,000, and they're like ecstatic, and they look at it every day, and it keeps going up, and they say, "Wow, there's no limit to this. This is what I want." And then all of a sudden, there's a stock market crash, and now in one day he lost half of the value that the profit. And then he thinks, well, you know, it'll stop right there and go back up again. But then it keeps going down, you know, and then it goes minus, and now he's in complete anxiety. See? And I always tell this story about an uncle I had, and he was on the stock market all the time, and I could tell when the stock market went up and when the stock market went down. When my uncle was in a good mood and he'd give me a candy or a lollipop or ice cream and joke around, that means the stock market went up. I didn't have to look in the news to see what the stock market did. And when I went to see him, if he was in a bad mood, he said, "Don't bother me now, don't bother me now, yeah, go away." So that means the stock market went down that day. You see, that's gain and safety. You see, that's what all people are troubled by every day: gain and safety. So here it's saying, this transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna. In other words, by tolerating the dualities of material life and becoming free from anxieties regarding gain and safety and loss, gain and safety, this transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna. Now, what does that mean exactly, fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna? It means you trust his words. When he says, "Konteha pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati," declare it boldly, Arjuna, that my devotee will never perish. In other words, he's saying, Arjuna, you tell the people, because if I tell the people, they might not believe me, because I broke my promise to save you from Bhisma, Pitamaha, who was going to kill you. Right? Bhisma Pitamaha, it was impossible for Arjuna to defeat Bhisma Pitamaha, because Bhisma Pitamaha was not an ordinary human being. He was a demigod. He was far superior to Arjuna. And Arjuna is the greatest archer in the world, but Bhisma was greater than him. He could have killed him. But Krishna saved Arjuna from Bhisma's arrows. So, therefore, we have to trust Krishna's words. That means the goodwill of the Lord. He's promising to protect his devotee who's sincere and surrendered and interested in glorifying the Lord and serving the Lord. Okay, so Raghunath Das Goswami and Kalushakar Alvar, they both say that one should be fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, even though I may continue to take birth here, life after life. In other words, not even want liberation. Okay. So then in the next verse, we covered half of it yesterday, and we'll pick up right from where we stopped. And it says, a class of so-called devotees known as sahajiyas try to imitate the Lord's pastimes, although they have no understanding of the amorous love in his expansions of pleasure potency. Their superficial imitation can create havoc on the path for the advancement of one's spiritual relationship with the Lord. Material sexual indulgence can never be equated with spiritual love, which is in unadulterated goodness. The activities of the sahajiyas simply lower one deeper into material contamination of the senses and mind. Krishna's transcendental pastimes display eternal servitorship to Ahokshaja, the Supreme Lord, who is beyond all conception through material senses. Materialistic conditioned souls do not understand the transcendental exchanges of love, but they like to indulge in sense gratification in the name of devotional service. The activities of the Supreme Lord can never be understood by irresponsible persons who think the pastimes of Radha and Krishna to be ordinary affairs. The rasa dance is arranged by Krishna's internal potency, Yogamaya, and is beyond the grasp of the materially affected person. Trying to throw mud into transcendence with their perversity, the Sahajiyas misinterpret the sayings Tat Parat Vena Nirmalam and Tat Paro Bhavet. By misinterpreting Tadrishi Krida, they want to indulge in sex while pretending to imitate Lord Krishna. But one must actually understand the imports or the meanings of the words through the intelligence of the authorized Goswamis. So that's the main statement right there. Let's read that last statement again. It says that one must understand the meanings of the words of the acharyas and of Krishna through the intelligence of the authorized Goswamis. Srila Narottam Das Thakura, in his prayers to the Goswamis, has explained his inability to understand such spiritual affairs. Rupa Raghunatha Pade Haibi Akuti Kabehama Bujahaba say Yugala Piriti. When will I be eager to understand the literature given by the Goswamis? Then I shall be able to understand the transcendental love affairs of Radha and Krishna. In other words, Prabhupada says, unless one is trained under the disciplic succession of the Goswamis, one cannot understand Radha and Krishna. Now this explains why most Sri Vaishnavas, not all of them, most Sri Vaishnavas don't understand Radha and Krishna at all. They even think that there's no Goloka Vrindavan, there's only Vaikuntha, and they ignore it. Why? Well, it's explained here. Unless one is trained under the disciplic succession of the Goswamis, that means the 6 Goswamis, right? And their writings like Jiva Goswami, etc. And one of those Goswamis is a Sri Vaishnava, Gopalabhatta Goswami, right? One cannot understand Radha and Krishna. The conditioned souls are naturally averse to understanding the spiritual existence of the Lord, and if they try to know the transcendental nature of the Lord's pastimes, while they remain absorbed in materialism, they are sure to blunder like the Sahajiyas. So that means these highly, let's say, evolved brahmanas, if they don't come to the literature and to the mood of the Goswamis of Vrindavan, they'll never understand Radha and Krishna. Although they're good people in many ways, and they're pious in many ways. Therefore, this imperative is applicable to pure devotees. Neophytes will be able to understand these affairs only after being elevated by regulated devotional service under the expert guidance of the spiritual master. Then they, too, will be competent to hear of the love affairs of Radha and Krishna. As long as one is in material conditioned life, strict discipline is required in the matter of moral and immoral activities. The absolute world is transcendental and free from such distinctions, because there inebriety or intoxication is not possible. But in this material world, a sexual appetite necessitates distinction between moral and immoral conduct. There are no sexual activities in the spiritual world. Therefore, there's no moral and immorality in the spiritual world. Everything is transcendental. The transactions between lover and beloved in the spiritual world are pure transcendental love and unadulterated bliss. So we are hearing from the Goswamis and Lord Chaitanya, who's Krishna himself. This is confidential knowledge. When it says confidential, it means not everybody is able to understand it. It can only be understood through devotional service under the guidance of bona fide gurus, and with the understanding an explanation of the Goswamis and Lord Chaitanya. Otherwise, we will never understand Radha and Krishna. That's why very few people actually become genuine devotees. Okay, we'll stop right there and continue again a little bit more tomorrow, and then we'll go on to new things after that. Are there any questions? Haribol, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.